But why the tower specifically is because it's close. There's things that we've developed through the investigation that, out of an abundance of caution, if something were to happen, we want to make sure that those community members are in a safe place.
Have you received any threats besides this, calls or things that came into your office or
The only call that we've had so far on this is the one from SLC 911, or that SLC 911 took just before 8 o'clock this morning.
What do you have trash fines in the area affected?
I didn't hear you. What?
Trash fines in the area, they affected?
I do know that on Main Street there is a bus bridge from 2nd South to 3rd South, so I know that there is that impact also.
Can you tell us what it is about this item that raises suspicions to bring this amount of resources out?
Yeah, absolutely. There's something here that just doesn't seem right? It's out of the ordinary, so when we get here, it starts with that initial response with our patrol officers, working with our on-duty watch commander to determine how we need to scale it up or scale it down. Clearly, we have scaled it up because we feel like we need to make sure that we're covering all of our bases, taking that time, utilizing the resources and partners that we have throughout the valley to make sure that we're taking this step by step, piece by piece, to reach a safe resolution.
Is this at all related to yesterday's incident at the bookstore?
I don't have any information or to be able to relate to that. That'll be part of the ongoing investigation.
What needs to happen in order to make sure it's safe? Like, do we blow this item up, or like how do we, make it safe?
Again, I can't talk specifics on how the processes work. We're fortunate to partner with the Air National Guard, the County Bomb Squad, the FBI, the fire department to work together collaboratively, that everyone has their own stake in this, to work together to make sure that we're reaching a peaceful resolution.
Is it safe to say you don't know what this item is yet?
At this time, we're still trying to figure it out. That's why we have the resources here. We'll scale up, we'll scale down based on how the investigation flows.
How much longer do we think that this area will be impacted?
This area will be impacted for as long as it takes. Again, we want to make sure that when we need to keep the priority of community safety at the top of our minds. We recognize that there are impacts, especially as we're going to come into that later afternoon hour where people are now going to start heading home for the day or coming in for evening activities. We would just ask the community to continue to be patient while we work through this.
One building evacuated?
So far, one building has been evacuated.
Can people still get to other buildings by foot through the closure area?
No, that's a great question. No, there is no traffic whatsoever on 2nd South from Main Street to West Temple Street. That includes foot traffic and bike traffic. Any kind of traffic, you're not allowed in the area.
So if people leave buildings, they won't be able to get back in
at this point in time, correct.
And it sounds like some of these businesses haven't had closed down completely.
Yeah, and we recognize that. But again, it's all about safety. We want to make sure the businesses, the community members that are coming down.
We've been listening to a live update. Police have evacuated the U.S. Bank Tower due to a suspicious item there. Again, found in the alley 20th West, 200 South. Lindsay Harris joins me in studio as we try to figure out everything. A lot of unknown, a lot of uncertainties at this point. But Lindsay, tell us what you picked up there.
Yeah, situations like this are really tough because police are trying not to panic, right? The public, I think. They're trying not to reveal more information than they have at this point. And until they figure out what's going on, I think they don't want to alarm. But you heard Sergeant Mark Wyan with Salt Lake City Police Department say that they have scaled up some of their efforts on scene now. This has been going on since about 8 a.m. this morning. And so clearly they're still trying to figure out what this suspicious item is. Now, as you mentioned, the U.S. Bank Tower has been evacuated again. This suspicious item was found in an alley outside of the building, and a community member called that in earlier this morning. Again, they have a lot of resources on scene. And you heard Sergeant Mark Wyan also say something didn't seem right. And so they scaled it up. And so whatever intelligence they have, whatever information they have, has caused the resources to be on scene. But they did interestingly say that they have no information as to whether this is tied to a bomb threat that happened at the King's English bookstore. Doesn't mean it's not connected. Doesn't mean it does. They just don't have any information on that. And it's just really impacting foot traffic and local traffic in the area, again, at 20th West and 200 South, that U.S. Bank Tower. So really impacting people downtown, and obviously a scary situation for people who are in the area not knowing what this package is. But you heard Salt Lake City Police say they have the FBI, they have police there, obviously, and they have the county bomb squad there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll continue to watch all of that, including traffic. I know Ricky Macy's tracking that closely in terms of what actually is closed all around that. Main to west on 200 South is also closed there. So you just want to avoid that area altogether. And again, they were very clear in terms of out of an abundance of caution, those who have evacuated the U.S. Bank Tower will not be able to go back in anytime soon until this really comes to a resolution. Lindsay Ayers, thanks for joining us, and we will continue to follow this closely on KSL News Radio throughout the afternoon. Stay with us here. We'll step aside for some bottom of the hour news. We'll come back with more Inside Sources coming up next.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. We have breaking news about the evacuation of the U.S. Bank Tower on the corner of Main Street and 2nd South. It was evacuated as police checked out a suspicious item found nearby. Officers have closed 200 South between Main Street and West Temple, along with West Temple down to 300 South, to allow police and fire units to access the area. Investigators haven't yet determined exactly what they're dealing with, but the streets downtown are closed in the meantime. In the town of Hooper, residents will soon see a new 6% sales tax on their electric and gas bills starting in October. The Hooper City Council approved the municipal energy sales and use tax, and it's expected to bring in an extra $500,000 a year for the town. Mayor Dale Fowers says the city's spending has been shrinking over the past few years, and they need a bigger budget for infrastructure repairs. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. President Biden got his COVID booster shot without cameras present. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was pressed on why the White House wouldn't have cameras around when he did this.
It doesn't require photo op of the president to be doing that with the presidential photo op, to be more clear. So we thought that we needed to get that done, get that on his schedule. We did, and doesn't stop us for having a robust engagement with the public.
And COVID infection rates have been rising over the past few weeks around the country. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day, 21 points right now. The NASDAQ is up, though, just a little bit, 24 points right now. And our KSL weather, it's going to be a glorious week. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:31.
As the weather turns colder, this is when you need to get those new windows. So call Advanced Window Products. They'll replace your single-pane, rickety old windows with stylish, state-of-the-art double-pane windows with precision frames. You pick the style and color. They're custom-made right here in Salt Lake City. This company is so Utah. It's run by two guys who grew up here, Jake Weber and Utes defensive star Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sacktown with 7 NFL seasons under his belt. Great guys, great company, building high-quality windows for 37 years. Unlike other companies, they build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. No middleman. There's Jake, Nate, and their team, and there's you. Saving on the highest quality windows. Right now, before winter, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more, and they offer 60 months, 0% financing. So call Advanced Window Products now. You could have stylish new windows in 8 weeks. 801-850-9100. 801-850-9100, or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
Have you Googled yourself lately? Are there negative posts from an ex-employee or from a former client? Maybe an outdated news article or sensitive personal information about your family? Search engines don't always get it right. For right or wrong, it's your reputation on the line. That's where Reputation Defender by Norton comes in. One of the most trusted names in online reputation repair, Reputation Defender has been fixing people's search results for over 15 years. Their cutting-edge approaches help you to wipe away unwanted information in your search results. They also promote the good stuff so that it rises to the top, helping you put your best foot forward. Your good name is too valuable to leave to the whims of a Google algorithm. Take control with Reputation Defender. You can start by getting your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com. or call 800-401-6681 to speak to an expert. That's 800-401-6681.
You can stream your favorite show anytime, but the opera only happens 4 times per year. Join us and make new memories with your family and friends. Enjoy the entertaining stories, beautiful sets and costumes, and mesmerizing music. You deserve an elegant night on the town or a Sunday matinee with Utah Opera. Your couch will be there when you get back. This is it, your perfect first opera. October 7th through the 15th, Utah Opera begins its season with one of the most popular operas of all time, Puccini's La Bohème. This tragic love story will seem familiar. It was the inspiration for the smash hit Rent. You'll recognize characters and moments like Mimi asking Rodolfo to light her candle. But now experience it with an operatic twist. Tickets start at $21. Get yours today at utahopera.org.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
We had a medical situation in traffic at the on-ramp, southbound I-15 at 3300 South. I think they've been able to clear that. Also, a ladder in the road in Lehigh on the on-ramp to southbound I-15 from 284, that's SR 92 Temp Highway. How do you know if you're getting the best deal on employee benefits? Well, you don't, unless you get free quotes from every insurance company every year. Visit shopmyplan.com to get free quotes. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, sunny and warm through Wednesday with highs in the mid-80s. It'll cool off Thursday and Friday with clouds and rain possible for the weekend. Right now, we're at 81 degrees with sunny skies. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
As we continue to watch the dysfunction in our nation's capital as we careen our way towards the end of the month, which we will remind everyone comes every year. September 30th comes. Congress is supposed to have its job done. Nothing happening in either the House or the Senate in terms of funding the government. One of their few legislative duties is outlined in the Constitution. And many across the country have been complaining about a broken Congress and a broken Senate in particular for a long time. So this is going to be one of those segments where I'm going to ask you to stay curious. And let's just explore the possibilities. We often, when we get to the idea of should we get rid of the filibuster in the United States Senate, this idea that you have to get to 60 votes, you have to have more than just a simple majority to change the dynamic in terms of what gets done. And there's lots of arguments, pro and con, and all of those things. And this is an interesting idea that I think is a hybrid model of that I think is worth thinking through and thinking again about. And really thrilled to have joining us on the program Thomas Koenig, student at Harvard Law School, member of the Federalist Society. And Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Boyd.
You and your colleague, Thomas Harvey, wrote in National Affairs the case for filibuster reform. And you're doing it in a way that we love to get on at this show in terms of just being curious and let's do something other than the false choice of either or. It doesn't have to be either just a majoritarian body like the House. There's some ways to do it. And so first for our listeners, just kind of lay out the case for a different kind of filibuster reform.
Yeah, so currently under the status quo, to pass a bill through the United States Senate, you're probably going to need 60 out of 100 senators in order to what's called invoke cloture and have a vote on the bill. That's the function of the filibuster. It kind of gives the minority kind of like a veto on whatever the majority is trying to do. There's one exception called the budget reconciliation exception. You can pass like taxing and spending bills through a simple majority, but let's put that to one side for now. So under the current, status quo, you're going to need 60 out of 100. The issue is, the parties, they don't really like compromising with one another these days. We're in a very partisan, polarized era. So not a lot gets done. And then people get fed up with Congress and they get more frustrated. and they start putting more pressure on the president to make the policies that really Congress should be doing. And then the courts have no choice but to slap down the president's illegal actions. And it's this kind of like spiral of dysfunction and frustration.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I was just going to introduce our proposal. Our proposal is pretty simple. It would create 2 tracks to pass legislation through the Senate. Under track 1, we'd preserve the status quo. So, if you can get 60 votes, you can pass the bill. You can pass the bill through the Senate, no problem. But if you can't get 60 votes, but you can get a simple majority, it doesn't mean your bill has to die immediately. Instead, what we're proposing is a change to the Senate rules that you would have to pass that bill twice over the course of 2 successive Congresses, meaning you pass it in one legislative session, and then after the next election, you have to pass it again, both times just by simple majority.
And that's a fascinating way to look at that. And of course, a lot of times we talk about the gridlock and some of the slowness of the process, and some benefits to that we know historically as the Senate being kind of the cooling saucer there, so to speak. But one of the things that you pointed out in your piece that I wanted to get to, that I think is really at the core of what you're proposing, it actually comes from our friend Jonathan Rauch, who comes on our show. You quoted him as saying, a hardening of incoherent ideological differences has begun to dominate American political debate. The political arguments often revolve around identities and generalized grievances, not actual policies geared towards addressing specific factual developments. I think that's a really important point in that you're not just saying, hey, let's just get rid of the rules, let's not just change it this way, but let's make sure we can get past the tribalism, the incoherent ideological differences, and actually return the Senate in particular into a deliberative body.
That's right. And what this proposal would do, it would clarify the stakes of elections. Because, the Senate would actually have the capacity to potentially pass some bills. But they would only be able to pass them, the partisan bills that don't have a vast, bipartisan majority, a supermajority in favor of them. They'd only have the chance to pass them if the majority party that has provisionally passed the bill can hold on to power after the next election. So what will that do to campaigns? What will that do to elections? It will force the senators and the candidates who are challenging them to have to focus on whatever the pending bills are. And that would be really good because to go to the Jonathan Rauch point, it would force voters and candidates alike to have to grapple with some of the tangible, concrete, actual issues affecting real people's lives in real ways. Because sometimes when you turn on the TV today or you read the newspaper and you look at the politicians talking, it's not entirely clear what they're talking about that's relevant to real life.
Yeah.
They're talking about conspiracy theory X or grievance Y. It's all very abstract. Yeah. It doesn't really relate to our day-to-day lives that much.
Yeah.
But the bills, the actual legislation, it would.
Yeah. I love that. I love that having to pass it over consecutive sessions of Congress. In other words, there would have to be an intervening election cycle. And I think the dynamic that would create in the elections, it would force campaigns not to be about bumper sticker slogans or you have to vote for me because the other side is not just wrong, they're wrong and evil. You'd actually have to say, well, policy X, policy Y, policy Z, we can get all of those done if we maintain control of the Senate or if we're able to continue to push it all forward. And so it changes the conversation, I think, in the debate, especially during election cycles.
That's exactly right. And it would also give us time to think about what the different parties have on offer. I'm coming at this issue from a more conservative standpoint, and oftentimes conservatives critique Democrats who want to get rid of the filibuster because they say, hey, the Democrats, they're just going to try to cram through their partisan agenda. Once they have a bare majority, they're just going to pass everything, Green New Deal, you name it. They're all going to just cram it through. But they could not do that under this proposal. Under this proposal, they would have to provisionally pass everything they want to pass. None of it would be actually passed for purposes of, actual legislation. There would be no actual legal effects. No bills would be going to the president's desk. And then they would be forced to run on the legislation they've provisionally passed in the next campaign. They'd have to, put their money where their mouths are. They'd have to defend themselves if they voted in favor of a radical, crazy
Yeah.
bill that no one actually supports.
Yeah.
So it would preclude any of that funny business.
Yeah, the other thing I love about that is and you pointed out this in your piece as well, that it would actually require these bills, these pieces of legislation, to actually stand up over time. So often we get these things that are just a flurry of emotion, a flurry of activity, all kinds of dollars get spent by special interest groups to try to influence it. By having this kind of procedure, it'd have to be sustained over time. And the other thing that would allow people to do, which often doesn't happen these days, is it would actually allow everyone to read the bill. I know that's really radical thinking, but I actually think that could be really good too, because then you would actually have time to say, well, actually on page 897 of the bill, here's 4 things we ought to be thinking about.
That's right. And, that timing point, that's why, my co-author, Tom Harvey, and I, that's why we think we have the founders on our side. Because, we use these different quotes from James Madison. It's very clear. They conceptualized the Senate as this deliberative body where things could, take time and cool off. They did not conceptualize it as a legislative graveyard. And what our proposal does is it gives the Senate the time to be the cooling saucer, and it brings voters into the process. These debates will play out over years under our proposal if the bill cannot obtain that supermajority. So, it serves that deliberative function. That's one of the core features of the Senate that currently, the Senate is not living up to the hype. It's not the world's greatest deliberative body anymore.
That's right.
But this proposal would help nudge it back towards that original vision.
Yeah, this is a great, curious question that we all ought to be thinking through and thinking about, because again, it does exactly as you laid it out, Thomas, that it prevents Congress from just abdicating their authority to the executive branch. The executive branch is all too happy to take that, regardless of whether it's a Democrat or a Republican. They'll take it, they'll use it, and then it ends up in the court, and we work our way up to the Supreme Court, which is why we have the contention around all of that. This is a great one for all of us to be thinking and rethinking in terms of how do we restore that real debate around not politics, not politicians, but policy and the principles. It's a great way to get to a real debate. Thomas, thanks so much for joining us today. Great piece, great thinking, and thanks for helping us think just a little bit deeper today.
Thank you, Boyd.
All right. Really interesting way to look at the filibuster. A different way, not a either or, not a all or nothing, but a different way to make our members of the Senate work a little harder, maybe work a little smarter, and maybe involve all of us in the conversation just a little bit better. We'll be right back.
Everybody knows Cache Valley has the happiest cows in the universe, and we're ready to celebrate. Round up your herd and head to Logan, Utah for the 3rd annual free Cache Valley Cheese and Dairy Festival, September 29th and 30th. Free samples, live music, and food trucks. Workshops where you can learn how to fine-tune your taste buds for gourmet cheese tasting, make an eye-popping charcuterie board, or identify the subtle essences in dark chocolate from around the world. You can even learn to make your own marvelous mozzarella at home. Wait, I want to tell you about something totally awesome. You can watch an authentic cheesemonger crack open a 75-pound wheel of Parmesan Reggiano cheese. That's 131 gallons of milk aged over 730 days for Parmesan perfection. You can even blow a giant Swiss Alpenhorn or practice your yodeling. Well, maybe don't do that part. Loosen your belt for a delicious cheesy Dutch oven dinner and entertainment on Saturday night. Buy your dinner tickets online and in advance. Amazing! Get moving! CacheCheeseFest.com.
Hey guys, do you know what makes Revive Men's Health Salt Lake City different? You. Every Revive treatment and medication is personalized just for you. Revive has the experts that guys go to when their current treatment isn't working. They have a complicated medical condition, or they're just not happy with their daily performance. Since 2011, they've helped thousands of local men suffering with the symptoms of low T and ED. Their goal is simple: to get to the bottom of your issues and fix them. Your best performance requires more than generic ED medications or a low-dose testosterone booster at a low-ball price like you find online. Revive medications are custom compounded, affordable, and guaranteed to resolve your issues. Stop dealing with the symptoms of low T or ED. Book your T-check and exam today. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit us at ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Even before the pandemic, 1 in 5 American adults experience some form of mental illness, depression, suicide, prescription opioid misuse. Utah isn't immune to our share of challenges, but there is hope. We need to take action to keep our loved ones safe. That's why KSL has teamed with the University of Utah Huntsman Mental Health Institute to bring you hope and help you thrive. It's Healthy Mind Matters. Find out more at healthymindmatters.com.
Dave and Dujanovic.
I hope our listeners take away lots of information, but also a new way of looking at a topic.
Ideas, their thoughts, the things they thought they knew. I hope that gets challenged when they listen to us.
I've had listeners stop me at the grocery store and ask me, what is your show about? And I'll tell them our show is anything from politics to your pocketbook.
Listen for Dave and Dujanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, police have been checking out a suspicious object near a downtown office building since about 8 o'clock this morning. The building's been evacuated. They've shut down 200 South between Main Street and West Temple. Second, the city of Hooper will be charging a new 6% sales tax on utilities. Third, President Biden got his COVID booster shot, but media cameras weren't there to see it. Right now, 81 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Well, this Wednesday, the Republican presidential candidates who qualify will participate in the second debate for the Republican nomination. And we wanted to break that down just a little bit in terms of what to expect, what to be watching for. I think this is a pretty important one in terms of magnitude for many of these candidates, trying to break out, trying to get traction, trying to get some momentum in one way or another, whether it's with support or dollars to keep the campaigns rolling. It's going to be a fascinating debate. The moderators for the debate primary will be Dana Perino and Stuart Varney from Fox and Fox Business as they take it on. And this will be broadcast, of course, from the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. And it's an amazing backdrop. If you haven't been to the Ronald Reagan Library, it is stunning. Of all the presidential libraries, it is there's a magnitude there that is pretty significant. You have Air Force One, of course, sitting there as part of the backdrop. And so it will be a stunning place. I am sure that the name Ronald Reagan, if you're going to play bingo at home, I would buy Ronald Reagan for a gazillion because his name will be invoked early and often, I'm guessing, by all of the candidates trying to claim that mantle as the Republican nominee. And so we wanted to get inside it just a little bit before we get into Wednesday to see, what's going to be happening there. And first, we want to start with the moderators. It's a very interesting choice for the moderators. Dana Perino, this will be her first time. Of course, she began behind the podium in the White House press briefing room for George W. Bush. Of course, has been with Fox News for a long time. And Stuart Varney, of course, most people know as a longtime business moderator and host for Fox and Fox Business. And so an interesting set of angles coming into this from the moderator's chair. So over the weekend, debate moderator Dana Perino, a friend of our show, explaining what's at stake during this second debate.
I think that because in the first debate, no one really came away with like a big breakout moment, that in a lot of ways, even though we cover this all the time, that was our first chance to introduce themselves to GOP primary voters and others who were watching. Now, this is where the rubber hits the road. So you have a situation where somebody needs a breakout moment. You might have someone deciding to be quite aggressive. I don't necessarily think that works in their favor, but their donors, their supporters want to see, do you have what it takes to be the front runner's main rival? And so this is a very important debate. They run a lot of ads. Ads cost a lot of money. The debate, if you've made the stage, that is earned media time, and it's your time to shine if you can make it.
So a really interesting perspective there from Dana Perino. And I agree with Dana in terms of nobody really had a stunning, like big-time lightning in a bottle kind of breakout moment. There are a number of these candidates who are just kind of hanging on and hanging around. And so the question for me is going to be, will some of them swing big? Will some swing wildly? And will some just be too cute by half, just trying to get some attention? Because to me, none of those things work. So I think it's going to be restraint always works. And you got to have a little bit of restraint there as you try to navigate your way through a debate stage. And so that's going to be an interesting one to watch to see how each of them play there. Those who have actually qualified, remember the Republican Committee, National Committee, has continued to up the ante in terms of qualifying for the debate stage. So currently on the stage, you'll have Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, Chris Christie, Tim Scott, Doug Burgum, and, of course, the former President Donald Trump has qualified, but is not going to be there at the Reagan Library. He is going to be in Detroit with the United Auto Workers doing a rally there in Michigan. Will also be interesting because we know President Joe Biden is on his way to picket with those United Auto Workers, so maybe they can do that together. They can have a joint rally. I think that would be efficient use of time and resources. So each of these candidates have something to prove. They have something they have to get to. And the question is, who will be able to do that in a meaningful and effective way? Now, Doug Burgum is one of those who has been under the radar, kind of on the fringe in terms of qualifying. It appears that he has qualified, according to NBC analysis. And he's really been pushing things out, a lot of advertising over the last 10 days in particular. And he has an interesting story. He's wealthy. He's governor. He's kind of gone through all of those things in terms of North Dakota. He has a good story to tell there. The question will be, can he flex that a little bit more, lean in a little bit more on some of those key issues on the debate stage? Of course, Governor Ron DeSantis has been in a bit of a tailspin really since he launched. He did far better before he was in the race, both in terms of fundraising and percentage of polls in key early voting states like Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. He was doing better on both fronts before he got into the race and has been kind of in decline ever since. I think Ron DeSantis had a fairly decent first debate, but it didn't really do anything that made you think, okay, that's the person I want in the Oval Office. And that's part of what all of these candidates have to do. You have to remember that overwhelmingly, these candidates are going to be pretty similar when it comes to policy. Most of the policies are going to be pretty similar. They're all Republicans. They're all running for the Republican nomination. They're going to be fairly consistent on a good chunk of the issues. So how do you then differentiate? Part of that will be personalities. Part of that will be what they do as they combat each other. But a couple of things to keep your eye on rolling into the debate. We know Nikki Haley had a very good first debate. Many felt like she won that first debate, had some strong moments, had some strong counter-criticism for Vivek Ramaswamy as it related to international affairs. She had a very strong answer and different kind of dialogue around some of the hot-button issues like abortion. And so she had a very good night. And yet, here we are almost 6 weeks down the road, and I don't know that anyone can really say she took that moment and she turned it into forward movement. There hasn't been a real steady climb in the polls. There hasn't been a real steady climb in terms of dollars coming into the campaign. And so I think the challenge for Nikki Haley is to not only show that she can deliver on the foreign policy issues, that she can speak in a little different language when it comes to some of the domestic issues, but can she really create a story that she can invite the American people to become part of? I think that's a big test for all of the candidates, but Nikki Haley in particular, because you don't have a sense of what is this all about? What are you calling me to do if I want to join your campaign and join your movement to become president? Senator Tim Scott is another one, I think, who really needs a good night in the Ronald Reagan Library on Wednesday this week. It was a little bit of a non-factor in terms of the first debate. Had a few nice moments. He's always positive. He is the happy warrior. If I were advising Tim Scott today, in terms of his strategy leading into Wednesday, I would say, Senator Scott, you have to show the American people today that they should not assume that because you are a happy warrior that you are not a warrior, that you don't have a set of principles and a set of policies that you're really ready to fight for and to lead for. And when I say fight, I don't mean fight in the terms of Twitter or X or whatever you call it now, or social media battles. I mean a fight as in stand up and speak out on the principles and the policies. I think he has some of those policy plans in place. He's got to articulate them in a way that invites the American people to come along. So not enough to be a happy warrior. You have to be a happy warrior that is a warrior with a strategy and a plan that you can have the American people come along with. One other to keep your eye on going into this second debate is Chris Christie. Chris Christie has got a little bit of momentum up in New Hampshire. Of course, he's been camping out in New Hampshire for quite some time now. I think they're going to start charging him taxes up there. That's really where he staked his campaign, is on New Jersey. And so it'll be interesting to see what he does there. And if he gets past just criticizing former President Trump and gets on to issues beyond that I think are important to the American people. He's actually quite good in that space. It'll be interesting to see if he goes to that space. And then, of course, former Vice President Mike Pence showed that he has that fight in the last debate, identified some of the key differences with some of those that maybe have some nice slogans but not a lot of substance under the hood. I think the former vice president is going to have to continue to demonstrate that so people can see and say, yep, I could see him as the number one behind the desk. We'll continue to follow that as we roll towards Wednesday in the debate at the Ronald Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California. Number 2 for the Republicans. We'll step aside for top of the hour news. More Inside Sources coming up next on KSL News Radio. Stick around.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen at home on any smart speaker and in your car at 102.7 FM. This is KSL News Radio, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top story this hour. 200 South still closed in downtown Salt Lake. Police still trying to identify a suspicious item found near the U.S. Bank Tower this morning. KSL News Radio's Amy Kobabe is on the scene with more. Amy?
Dan, 200 South here is just full of police cars and fire trucks and ambulance and a bomb squad. I've seen some robots and a couple of people with a bomb squad written on the back of their uniforms. And what we are hearing from police is that they have this entire block closed. People are on lockdown, businesses, and the U.S. Bank building has been evacuated. And they haven't said exactly why they're doing this. They say that safety is the number one reason, but they got a call at 8 a.m. for a suspicious package in the area, and they're taking every precaution that they can now, and we're just waiting here to see kind of what happens. No estimate even on when people will be allowed back in this area, and we're just kind of hoping for the best. Police on the scene, fire on the scene. Reporting live, Amy Kobabe, KSL News Radio.
Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and California Governor Gavin Newsom have plans to debate each other. There's a date set after both men said they would do it. ABC's Alex Stone reports.
Both Ron DeSantis and Gavin Newsom have talked a lot about doing a debate. It seemed like a lot of posturing and taking jabs at the other. At times, it's felt like it was never really going to happen. The two men are about as polar opposite in ideology as you can get. But now Fox News announcing a date has been set. November 30th, 90 minutes between DeSantis and Newsom. It'll take place in Georgia. Exact location to be determined. The rules of the debate still have to be figured out. Alex Stone, ABC News.
And DeSantis is officially a candidate for the Republican nomination for president, while Newsom hasn't said yet whether he's running. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average is up now on the day after being down a little bit earlier. 43 points in the green right now, while the NASDAQ is up 59 points. And we just have sunny, beautiful weather ahead for a couple of days. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:02.
If you need a break from it all, this weekend is General Conference.
When you've dealt with a lot and you need to recharge, this weekend is General Conference.
If things are difficult or life is going really well.
For all these times, a reminder, it's time for General Conference Weekend at 102.7 FM and streaming live on the app for KSL News Radio.
Tim Jr. here from RGS Exteriors. I want you to know that it's the little things that count. Any remodeler can say they treat customers right when it comes to siding, gutters, windows, and exteriors. It's hard to know for sure. If a contractor uses cheap generic nails instead of super grippy ridge shaft nails for your siding, would you even know? If they use cheap $4 caulk to install your new windows instead of paying $9 a tube for the good stuff, could you tell by looking? It all comes down to the details and trust. At RGS Exteriors, we only do things one way, the right way. We never cut corners. We never skimp on details. We never do less than the job requires. That's why we offer our industry's exclusive 10-year everything guarantee. And it's why we have the happiest customers. If you need any gutters, siding, or replacement windows, call RGS Exteriors at 801-280-3110 or visit rgsutah.com. That's 801-280-3110 or online at rgsutah.com.
At Shane Company, we believe everybody is made to shine. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. Your moments, your milestones, your love story all deserve to shine bright. You don't need an occasion. You and your life are the event. So put on earrings that make you sparkle, diamonds that light up the room, an heirloom you'll treasure for years to come. We're all made to shine. Shane Company, fine jewelry since 1929.
The UACPA supports certified professional accountants in Utah through ongoing professional education and leadership development for an ever-changing financial world. Find a CPA at uacpa.org.
We have enough people running around Broadcast House at 4 in the morning to field a football team.
Producers, reporters, the traffic team, and us.
This is Tim and Amanda.
Join us each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
No accidents, no delays on any of the Valley freeways or main secondaries. We do have some unusual slowdowns north and southbound on Highway 40. This is in Wasatch County north of Strawberry Reservoir. And of course, 200 South blocked to traffic, both vehicular and pedestrians between West Temple and Main. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, sunny and warm through Wednesday, highs in mid-80s. It cools off Thursday and Friday with clouds and rain possible for the weekend. Right now, 82 degrees and sunny. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Over the past few years, President Biden's been involved with a number of different labor disputes, negotiating with companies and employees to end strikes. But is the self-declared most pro-union president's magic beginning to wear off when it comes to the United Auto Workers Union? And what's the path forward? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, as the United Auto Workers strike continues on, President Biden is looking at a little shift in tactics. A great piece in Politico today, why Biden's strike magic has faltered. And really pleased to have joining us on the program today, Tanya Snyder, who covers transportation for Politico. And Tanya, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So give us some of the baseline there. The president, of course, loves to tout his bona fides as the most union president ever. But when it comes to the United Auto Workers, it seems like we've lost a step or something has become a little bit of a disconnect. What do you think that is?
Yeah, well, Sean Fain is the president of the United Auto Workers, and he's very new. He's been in the position for just about 6 months, and he's he's much more militant than a lot of labor leaders and the past labor leader, and so he's very demanding. And what he demands from the White House has been, I think, surprising. A lot of Biden's, like you said, his pro-union bona fides are pretty strong and go pretty far in most of the labor movement. But it really hasn't been working with Shawn Fain.
Yeah, and I think it's been interesting, too, to see, and you noted this in your piece, kind of this change in tactics. The president has said he's going to go to Michigan on Tuesday. Kind of describe that for us in terms of a pivot. He hasn't had to do that kind of lean in for quite some time.
Right. He's made public statements in favor of the auto workers, saying that it's been a time of record profits for the auto companies, and it should be a time of record contracts for the workers. That made the UAW happy to some extent, but he's also made some missteps. He predicted that there wouldn't be a strike, and that annoyed the UAW. He has said some other things about potentially supporting suppliers to blunt the impact of a strike. The unions didn't like that. They don't want the impact of the strike blunted. He tried to send some White House and administration liaisons to the picket lines. That wasn't enough. So the president has had to really kind of walk the talk, and he's going to Michigan on Tuesday.
Yeah, and describe for us, the president obviously has a complicated relationship with the CEO of GM. He also has some pretty good ties with some of the other CEOs that are getting some of those big paychecks and big bonuses because of those profits. Do you think that has been part of it? And I don't mean that as a gotcha. We're equal opportunity offenders. Republicans and Democrats alike have problems with all of those interconnected things. But is that something that seems to be maybe creating one more degree of difficulty for the president in terms of being seen as authentic and really being on the side of the union?
Well, the transition to electric vehicles has really complicated and added a new dimension to this whole labor dispute, because the president has been funneling billions of dollars, not necessarily to the car companies themselves, although in some cases they have definitely gotten large loans, but to incentivizing the purchase of electric vehicles and incentivizing the building of fueling infrastructure, charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. President Biden has been all in on the transition to EVs, as have the big three auto companies. And so, he's been really touting their successes and their move to electrify their fleets. And so he's been really walking in lockstep with them on this clean energy transition. And now he's finding himself in a more adversarial relationship, partly because the UAW is really demanding that he be so public about his support for them in a way that the president has taken a somewhat more measured approach and been able to work behind the scenes, sending emissaries to help smooth things over and make deals. He's really had to be very out front and very unequivocally, on the side of the workers on this one.
Yeah, and do you think that's partially kind of the state of kind of the grievance politics of our time? You have kind of the Bernie Sanders model, and I know there are some key people that have come out of the Sanders presidential runs, but you also have the former president, Donald Trump, in terms of a very grievance policy. I'm here, I've got your back, I'm fighting for you. And has that created an environment where the more diplomatic behind the scenes, as you said, kind of the shuttle diplomacy in these kinds of negotiations maybe isn't as valued as it used to be?
Well, I think that could be. There are, we quoted some people in our article that said very clearly that the behind the scenes approach doesn't work as well when workers really feel like they need to see you out there. They need to see you having their backs. I think that's true, and I think that it's true that Donald Trump does not take a nuanced approach. In this situation, I mean, Trump is in an odd position because unions tend not to support him. The UAW is definitely not going to endorse him. But I think there's a question of how much muscle the UAW is going to put into a reelection campaign for Biden if they don't get what they feel like they need from the White House at this moment.
Yeah, fascinating. And I don't think the word nuance and former President Trump go together in sentences at all. So So as you look at the move ahead, Tanya, what is it that you're watching for in these coming days, including the president's trip tomorrow? What are some of the things that you're looking for that might be indicators that either the magic is back or that the fence is being mended or that the path is being cleared for a resolution to be achieved?
It will be very interesting to see what that relationship looks like between Biden and the UAW president when he's there, if he actually walks a picket line. I know that the UAW would like to see him do that. In terms of the negotiations between the car companies and the UAW started the strike with 3 plants. They're doing this, what they're calling a stand-up strike, and it's really keeping the companies guessing in terms of, where it's going to go next. And it's a really novel approach to a strike. They started with 3 plants, and then the next week they extended it to 38 more plants. So that really is a massive escalation. And it could still, go anywhere from here. And I'm sure that, on Friday, if the strike hasn't ended by then, we will see another escalation.
Wow, fascinating stuff. Great insight and fantastic reporting. I loved all the details you got into and some of the previous strikes and how that all plays together. Excellent stuff as always. Tanya Snyder covers transportation for Politico. Tanya, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Boyd.
Great perspective there from Tanya Snyder from Politico. And it is a really good piece. Regardless of where you fall on the labor issue or this particular strike, there's some really important concepts in there in terms of the negotiations, what they're negotiating over, where the challenges are, where the president has some real struggles in terms of the United Auto Workers. And that impacts not only the current strike, which, as Tanya pointed out, will escalate if this continues on to Friday. But there's also an escalation factor for President Biden, as this is a key constituent group for his reelection campaign in 2024. Places like Michigan, which have become ultimate swing states in presidential elections, they're a real critical base there. So we'll continue to watch all of that as it moves forward to see if there is a solution on the horizon when it comes to the auto workers, whether the president has regained his magic and mojo as being the most pro-labor, pro-union president, as he likes to tout. We'll find out if that's just headline or if there's some real substance under the surface in the days ahead.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. This weekend, take a needed break, relax and refresh with the 193rd Semi-Annual General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. KSL's coverage begins Saturday morning at 9:30 with live sessions all weekend. We have you covered at 102.7 FM or on the app for KSL News Radio.
Hi, this is Congressman John Curtis. I know it can be stressful waiting for an answer from a government agency. If you live in Utah's 3rd Congressional District and you need help with a passport, the VA, IRS, Social Security, or another federal agency, come to my Congressional Outreach Open House. Please join us at Mountain America Credit Union at 9800 Monroe Street in Sandy on Monday, September 25th, anytime between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. I'll kick the event off at 4 p.m. with a brief update on Congress, and then my staff will be available to help you. Please come meet our amazing caseworkers and staff and get help with government agencies. Sign up for a quick one-on-one with me or learn about internship opportunities, grant applications, and other important issues. Refreshments will be served. Sign up at curtis.house.gov/events.
Paid for by the MRA of Congressman John Curtis.
Introducing Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric. We're bringing all of Utah's favorite HVAC, plumbing, and electrical brands under one roof. Whether it's a small clog or a larger mainline sewer drain issue, the experienced technicians at Yes are ready to solve all of your drain problems. Take advantage of our 83 or It's Free mainline drain clearing special. Feel secure knowing the trusted professionals at Yes guarantee that if we can't clear it, you don't pay for it. Visit theyesmancan.com for details, terms, and conditions.
Tonight is a night of crazy good premieres on NBC.
First, The Voice is back.
Yes, it is, with Gwen Stefani, John Legend, Niall Horan, and new coach Reba McEntire.
Love her. Then it's the premiere of The Irrational.
Jesse L. Martin stars as a brilliant professor who's an expert in human behavior.
And help solve crimes no one else can crack.
Watch once, you will be hooked.
The Irrational premieres after the return of The Voice.
Tonight on NBC.
Then stay tuned for KSL 5 News at 10 with this special investigative report.
We've all felt the pain of a cracked windshield, but for one Utah driver, 1, 2, 3 claims and he was out.
We're dropping your comprehensive and you'll have to figure it out.
But isn't that what insurance is for?
I pay extra for business insurance, so I thought they already calculated all that.
What you need to know to avoid cracks in your coverage.
Get Gephardt, cracks in your coverage. Tonight on KSL 5 News at 10.
Did you know gas goes bad in as little as 30 days? Bad gas can cause rough starts, poor performance, or no starts at all. Stable, America's #1 fuel stabilizer, ensures quick and easy starts after storage. Stable's proprietary formula keeps fuel fresh for 2 years, outperforming competitors. Whether it's your car, truck, boat, lawnmower, leaf blower, weed trimmer, ATV, motorcycle, or anything else with an engine, when you store, start with Stable.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Do you worry about how much someone drinks?
Do you feel angry or depressed most of the time? Do you feel neglected or unloved?
Do you feel you attract people who tend to be compulsive or abusive?
Do you have money problems because of someone else's drinking?
Are you afraid or embarrassed to bring your friends home?
Do you feel that if the drinker loved you, she or he would stop drinking?
If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are not alone.
More than half of all adults have a family history of alcoholism.
Not everyone trapped by alcohol is an alcoholic.
Families and friends are suffering too. Al-Anon and Alateen can help. Call 1-866-200-0223 or visit alanon.org/help.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, police haven't yet determined just what that suspicious object was found this morning near a downtown office building, but evacuations there remain in place. Second, the case involving an attack on the mayor of Orem could be a more serious matter than just a simple assault. And third, 2 governors planning a debate that's not part of the presidential campaign. Florida Republican Ron DeSantis will debate California Democrat Gavin Newsom on November 30th. 82 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. I am Boyd Matheson. Congress is slowly working its way back to our nation's capital today. After a long extended weekend, they will arrive with less than 5 days to fund the government. And I'm just going to remind everyone once again, September 30th always comes. That is the date when Congress has a duty outlined in the Constitution to fund the government. Comes every year. So no surprises. Nobody can claim it snuck up on them. Didn't get my homework done. Dog ate my homework. Nope. You've had a year to do this. No excuses. Either side. So with less than 5 days to fund it, of course, the battles continue to go on, and now it's all in the politics of it all rather than the policy of it all. And that's my biggest gripe with both parties, is they're much more willing to score some political points or to protect some political turf than they are to do the job that they were elected to do. So let's break it down just a little bit. Over the weekend, reporters asked House Speaker Kevin McCarthy if he'd seen any movement within his own party. He's got his own internal battle going over the government funding bill.
Oh, I saw some, but I mean, I've seen some of people before, and when crunch times come, they tell me one thing and walk on the floor, and they do something else because they have some other plan. Look, I think there are a few people that want to take it all down, right? For different reasons. I just do not believe 99.9% of the Republicans want that, and I don't think that's productive.
Speaker McCarthy went on to say that he posted the appropriations bills earlier in the summer and expressed frustration that nobody was making a move.
This entire time, I've been trying to change Washington where we do bills individually. We've been going along very successfully. We posted these bills back in July to give us your amendments. You don't have that much time. You don't get to read it so much. There's such an improvement in this process. And what happens, though, people start fighting over the dollar figure. Even though you had the debt ceiling deal, that's what, and they wanted less, right? So we try to find how do you get 218 to get there, and it gets frustration. Then what's inside a bill becomes a problem. You got people's of different philosophy. That's why you open it up to more amendments. But the idea that they would take DOD that everybody supported down and do it twice made no sense to me. So that's slowing everything up. They like to stop everything, and then they turn around and say, it's your fault. You're not getting anything done.
So a lot of frustration clearly there from Speaker Kevin McCarthy internally. He's dealing with that on the House side. The Senate, of course, has been just casually watching as things have been undulating along or careening out of control in Congress on the House side, if that's how you want to look at it. The interesting thing, though, is that Chuck Schumer, the lead Democrat for the in the Senate, has been kind of creeping up the pressure a little bit for Speaker McCarthy to get going. But he's also been taking some action that will provide sort of the plan B or an alternate path to fund the government. Now, the United States Senate is scheduled to reconvene formally with a vote at 5:30 on Tuesday. And so this is something to watch. So on Tuesday, tomorrow, at about 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 3:30 here, they will take the first in a series of procedural votes that will actually tee up the Federal Aviation Administration reauthorization bill. Now, you may be thinking, now, wait a minute. Don't we have to fund the entire government? Why are we just talking about the Aviation Administration? What Senator Schumer is doing there is creating a legislative vehicle to pass the continuing resolution to keep the government funded. So you have to have this legislative vehicle. So you will have this bill, which they will then drop the continuing resolution into. But that has to be voted on and be moving forward. So that's sort of what's happening on the Senate side, that they're going to get at least a ride, so to speak. They will have a way to introduce a continuing resolution as part of this federal aviation bill. So you don't have to worry too much about the federal aviation bill itself because it'll ultimately get swallowed up by the continuing resolution. It's just a procedural move by Senator Schumer to make sure that if everything unravels on the House side, he still has a path and a way to get something done to keep the government open and moving forward. Kevin McCarthy, for his part, again, is sort of somewhere between desperation, exasperation to get something that can be moved through and not just pass the House. Remember, it has to be able to pass the Senate as well. One of the interesting things, and I actually agree with Kevin McCarthy in saying, as far as amendments go, they've been posting these bills starting in July. So often those in the minority party or those who are maybe a minority within their own party often complain about, and rightly so, that they don't have an opportunity to offer amendments to bills. And what Speaker McCarthy says is, look, we've had the bills out there since July. We posted them in July. If you had amendments, you surely had time to think through an amendment and offer it up. So he tried to take that out of the quiver in terms of those who don't want to vote for this or that do want to go through more of a debate and have more amendments offered up in terms of what that actually looks like in the end. So a lot of things are going to happen in the coming week. Most of them will be smoke and mirrors. A lot of this will be rhetoric, but ultimately, everyone's going to have to sit down and say, where are we and where do we go from here? I think the most likely scenario, they go back to some version of what they agreed to when they passed the debt ceiling bill earlier this year and agreed on some spending levels. Now, the very important part of this, so they agreed in both the House and the Senate and with the president to some spending levels. Now, what the House has been proposing has been less than that. And we can debate that in terms of that's probably a good thing. Spending less is better than spending more, especially money that we don't have. But they went way below what the agreement was. So you have to go back and say, okay, well, if you had an agreement to spend X amount, should you stick with X amount or should you try to undercut it and go lower? On the Senate side, however, it's exactly the opposite. Everything that's been coming out of the Senate has been way above those spending caps that were agreed to as part of the debt ceiling deal. And so neither side has been really operating in great faith because both sides are not doing what they agreed to do just a few months ago. Short memories in Washington, D.C. And so part of that is getting those people back to the table and someone saying, look, we had a deal. Let's go back to the deal. And by the way, something that we should keep in mind about that deal, if everybody had just done their part of that deal, it would have represented one of the largest cuts in spending we've had in probably half a century. So it would have been a win for conservatives. It would have been a win in terms of reducing how much we're overspending. So there were some wins to be had there. But then both sides decided, no, we won't keep the deal. Democrats in the Senate said we're going to spend way more. Republicans in the House said, no, we're going to spend way less. And here we are. And so that's going to be the challenge, and that's what we're going to watch. It will be a fascinating week this week. There will be lots of movement. Actually, there'll be lots of motion. I predict there won't be a lot of movement until we get towards Friday and Saturday when September 30th actually comes. All right, we'll step aside for some bottom of the hour news. Don't go anywhere, though. You want to stick around for this next conversation. Two of the most fascinating people. We're going to have Dr. Jacqueline Rivers and Reverend Eugene Rivers from a conversation I had on Sunday. You do not want to miss this one. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. 200 South was shut down from Main Street to West Temple this morning after a suspicious item was found near the U.S. Bank Tower. Salt Lake City Police Sergeant Mark Wyan says somebody called 911 just before 8 o'clock this morning.
The item was found in a nearby alley next to a business, 20 West 200 South, so it's outside on a sidewalk in an alleyway.
The office tower was evacuated. Several agencies are working still to determine whether that object is actually dangerous. The woman accused of assaulting Orem's mayor last week could be facing felony charges. Assault in Utah is typically just a misdemeanor. The KSL legal analyst Greg Skordas explains why this case is different.
We want to protect our public servants, our elected officials, our police officers, probation officers, that type of thing, judges. We elevate the severity of the crime when that particular class of individuals is the victim.
Lene Pugmire was booked into jail after allegedly spitting on and slapping the mayor. She's since been released but is still facing charges. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez has been a key ally of President Biden on foreign relations. So far, though, he's refusing to step down after being hit with corruption charges. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre answered questions about the indictment.
We see this as a serious matter. I think, and we believe, the senator stepping down from his chairmanship was the right thing to do, obviously, the right thing to do. As it relates to anything else, any decision that he has to make, that's certainly going to be up to him.
Democratic Party leaders in Menendez's home state of New Jersey have urged him to resign. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average closing trading today, down 43 points. The NASDAQ, that was up 43 points on the day. S&P 500 was up 17, and the NASDAQ was up 59 points. And our KSL weather looks sunny and beautiful. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
Hi, this is Doug Wright. The other night, Dee and I had the chance to go to Hale Center Theater to see Around the World in 80 Days. What an amazing stage production that is. We're all familiar with the story, but oh my goodness, when they're in India and we're watching them riding an elephant, and of course the aerial artistry at Hale Center Theater, just superb and such a great part of this story. There's drama, there's pageantry. We even have a little melodrama portion when Fogg and company are touring the good old USA. Some of the greatest slow-mo acting I have ever seen in that scene. You're going to love Around the World in 80 Days. And your tickets are waiting for you right now at hct.org. And don't forget, Catch Me If You Can. That's on the other stage. Christmas Carol is just around the corner. And of course, Elf the Musical is coming up. It's all waiting at Hale Center Theater. Go to hct.org.
You can host the best backyard barbecue when you find a professional on Angie to make your backyard the best around. Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Inside to outside, repairs to renovations. Get started on the Angie app or visit Angie.com today. You can do this when you Angie that.
This season, your coffee orders are getting warmer, and your outfits are getting cozier. The world keeps changing, and so does COVID-19. That's why this season's COVID-19 shots have been updated. They're one of the best ways to help protect yourself against COVID-19. You can get a COVID-19 shot at the same visit as a flu shot if you're due for both, as recommended by the CDC. Talk to your healthcare provider to learn more and schedule at vaccines.gov. And don't forget to get extra cinnamon spice. Sponsored by Pfizer and BioNTech.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
On KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
Getting a report of a possible stalled vehicle in traffic northbound I-15 in Lehigh in one of the center lanes. Haven't found it yet, but keep an eye out for it. And then a crash in Utah County. This is eastbound Highway 189, Provo Canyon. It's going to be near Canyon Glen Park. And again, that was also in the center lane of travel, but no backups in the area. Limited tickets available for the Nate Burgat's Be Funny Tour, Saturday, September 30th, 3 p.m. at the Delta Center. Tickets available at deltacenter.com. Nate Bargat's Be Funny Tour live at the Delta Center. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, sunny and warm through Wednesday with highs in the mid-80s. It cools off Thursday and Friday with clouds and rain possible for the weekend. And right now we're at 82 degrees with sunshine. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson. On Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, once in a while and now and then you get to interact with some people that just send your mind to spinning and get you thinking about things in such a different way. I had an amazing opportunity over the weekend to interview two extraordinary leaders here in the United States of America who did that on Sunday edition for KSL TV. And our conversation covered all kinds of topics that we'll get to in just a minute. But my two guests are just these amazing souls. Dr. Jacqueline Rivers is the Executive Director and Senior Fellow for Social Science and Policy at the Seymour Institute for Black Church and Policy Studies. She's lectured at Harvard and Princeton and Stanford, the Vatican, a host of other places and institutions all around the world. Reverend Eugene Rivers III is the founder and director of the Seymour Institute for Black Church and Policy Studies. He's also widely published. He's a community activist, actually grew up in a gang in Philadelphia, has an amazing story. And the Rivers were in Utah last week as part of the Wheatley Institute down at Brigham Young University, and an amazing lecture series there, part of the Truman G. Madsen lecture series there. And as we had the chance to sit down with the Rivers and their unique story, we started in an interesting space. I talked to Dr. Rivers first, and she had talked about this idea that as it comes to addressing public policy, that we have to start with self-education, then we can get to friendship, and then we can get to the policy. And I thought she was kind of channeling her inner George Washington. Remember, we talked last week about the miracle of Philadelphia, and that George Washington said that the miracle bringing the Constitution about came because of that spirit of amity, mutual deference, and accommodation. So amity, that friendship, deference, and then accommodation, being able to compromise. And so I asked Dr. Rivers about that in terms of how can that actually help us as we try to bridge many of the divides that we have in this country.
I think it's so important that the young people last night were very interested in learning more about how we could work on racial reconciliation. And I think the first and most important thing is, as you said, Boyd, education. The people need to understand the racial history of the United States and to understand the things that were done in the past and how they resonate today. That the past isn't really past at all, that we're still dealing with the consequences of that. And I would really strongly recommend a book, The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, to get an understanding of the role that racial differences in house purchases made in wealth gaps now, and how that continues to resonate. So first thing is, let's educate ourselves. But then, as I went on to say, I think it's really important to build those friendships and those relationships so that we can have empathy and understanding, and out of that can flow good policy that can change the future.
I love it. It is changing the future. And you've been both of you have been part of these crucial conversations, building friendship across faith traditions into the public sector as well. And Reverend Rivers, I want to go to you. From your unique perch from the Black Church, we've talked a lot about religious liberty. The Supreme Court has weighed in a number of things. What does religious liberty look like from your perspective?
Well, see, it's interesting. Within the context of the Black church tradition, from slavery to the present, we've had a slightly different nuance. We talk about religious freedom, right? It's an interesting distinction, right? And from the Black church's perspective, religious freedom has been the basis, the pursuit, the exercise of religious freedom has been the basis for our development as a community. You see, it was the Black churches that were the key institutions of Black civil society that laid the foundation for the creation of Black colleges, Bible colleges, economic development, and so the sacred institutions were organized by slaves and the descendants of slaves to serve secular and civic purposes. And so the faith-based worldview, which provides the greatest kind of moral vision for the country, no matter what group you're in, is so essential. And so from the point of view of the Black church, the exercise of our religious freedom had positive secular consequences.
Love that.
And so we're thankful. We are so thankful for the Church of the Latter-day Saints and the kind of support. And here again, another extraordinary example of faith-based institutions serving secular purposes to enhance the comity and the civility of the nation.
Yeah. Oh, love that. Dr. Rivers, I want to go back to you. And both of you have done this so amazingly in really reclaiming language, biblical language, spiritual language, inspirational language,
That's right.
so that we can have a different kind of conversation on the complex and challenging issues of our day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it really is important that we continue to work towards the point that we just discussed, Boyd. How do we talk together in respectful ways? How do we develop language that really affirms each other? How do we listen to each other? And in meeting with young people on Thursday, we talked about the fact that listening to other people opens the door to being able to share your story. And that builds a whole new level of understanding and mutual engagement.
That shared story and listening and asking those questions. We went on with the Rivers, Dr. Rivers in particular. We started to talk about the 60th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous I Have a Dream speech. And as I regularly say, there's so much more to the speech. Everybody can quote the I Have a Dream portion, but there's so many other components to it that are so important and so pressing for our time. One that we got into with Dr. Rivers was this idea of the urgency of now, that this is not the time for incrementalism. We talked about the fact that within the context of that speech, Martin Luther King Jr. said, it's not enough to go from a small ghetto to a larger ghetto. That doesn't really move us forward. And so I asked Dr. Rivers to take a look at that in terms of how do we reshape those conversations into something more productive and more forward-moving?
Yes, so I think it's really important that people understand that Dr. King was advocating for greater economic equality, and that one of the key drivers of economic equality is residential segregation. And so we have the opportunity to really begin to reevaluate that. How do we, because most recent studies, as recently as 2016, show that even if you have the same income level as someone who's white, if you're black, you don't get to live in an equally nice neighborhood. And sociologists have shown that out of that flows lack of access to good quality education, lack of access to jobs, lack of access to good public services. It really means a lower quality of life. So it's a really urgent question for us to address, and we have an opportunity now to begin to reevaluate that and figure out how do we impact residential segregation.
Yeah, it's so important, and part of that whole process, Abraham Lincoln knew that it wasn't just access to capital, it was access to social capital, it was access to people and relationships.
Oh, yes.
And Reverend Rivers, you've done a lot of work on this as it relates to family, as it relates to fathers and that connection. Give some insight there.
One of the things that's most important, and the faith communities can play a singular role in the country, is it's resurrecting the idea of the importance of fatherhood. And see, the black church is in a unique, strategically unique position because our communities are the ones most adversely affected by the father absence, number one. Number two, as the premier sovereign institution of black America, the black church, even now, we must work to articulate forcefully the primary importance of fatherhood. And we're in a unique position to go against all of the anti-male feminism and all the other ideological things that are now in circulation. And our contention is we must resurrect the image of father. For us as Christians, you know, Jesus says, this is how you ought to pray. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Yeah. So if Jesus says, puts his stamp of approval on fatherhood, that's the bottom line. That's it.
That's a great place to start.
And so what the black churches must do, working in collaboration with others, is build a pro-fatherhood movement. Yeah. There needs to be, and the faith-based institutions are uniquely qualified because ain't nobody run up in nobody's church and tell them what that man's going to preach. So we have the institutional, spiritual, and cultural autonomy and power to articulate as a countervailing influence in the society. And so we just got to Listen, God has blessed us in faith-based institutions, and now we have to mobilize our spiritual and cultural capital to advance a vision which defends, for me, first the fatherhood of God and the importance of fatherhood in the community.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. One of the other things that Dr. King got to was the urgency of now. That the idea that we can't just go along with incrementalism, that we really have to get past these jangling discords and all of that. And one of the things that both of you have focused on in terms of those dealing with poverty is looking at their identity, which you spoke to so eloquently, Dr. Rivers, that these are not liabilities to be managed. These are people with individual identity and infinite potential. Give us some perspective in terms of how should we be approaching that to really lift everyone.
So that's really an important point, Boyd, because even looking back to this question of fatherhood, so much depends on the education that people are able to access. So if to fulfill that potential and to recognize all that young black men can be, they need education, because research has shown that if they don't graduate from high school, that young black men and young white men as well who don't graduate from high school have a much higher likelihood of being incarcerated. And that puts them in a position where they're not able to play the role of husbands and fathers as they ought. So to realize that potential that you're talking about, Boyd, we in society need to be thinking about how we educate our young men, especially young black men.
Yeah, so important. And Reverend Rivers, of course, to me, one of the most powerful things is that out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. Is so important. Give us one thing, just real quickly, that you think we ought to be thinking about, something we ought to be doing differently to create that hope and that connection in the country.
Excellent point. One of the most important things that needs to happen and can happen is the faith communities, the adults, the spiritual and intellectual adults of the faith communities must come together, because we are the last best hope. If you pay any attention to what's going on in the country, as the kids would say, we are off the hook with the wire cut. And so we need faith leaders, and we're so thankful to the Church of Latter-day Saints for the moral support and their commitment to genuine reconciliation. So, number one, black churches and the white Christian community, and we look to the LDS for leadership, have to begin a dialogue, because right now, the only game left in America to keep this thing from going over the edge are the faith communities.
Fascinating conversation. You can check out all of that at ksltv.com, Sunday edition. We'll step aside for a quick break. More Inside Sources coming up next. And we have breaking news coming out of downtown Salt Lake City. KSL News radio reporter Amy Kobabe joins us on the line with more. Amy?
Boyd, I'm here on the 200 South Block and West Temple of downtown Salt Lake City, where police have had an entire block and a half about closed all day for a suspicious item that was found early this morning. We just got word from police that there is nothing suspicious about it now. They are clearing the scene and say there is no danger in this area. People have been evacuated. Several people have been told to shelter in place in this block, and now getting the all clear, a sigh of relief here as police will be clearing out over the next hour. There are a lot of them here, hundreds, including bomb squad, Air Force, and fire department that have all responded to this. So a sigh of relief, as we've been just told from Salt Lake City Police, that there is no danger here in this area. Boyd?
Great reporting as always. KSL News Radio's Amy Kobabe joined us live on the scene there to continue that. We'll follow that all afternoon here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for a quick break. More Inside Sources coming up next.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean. Of course I use Mr. Clean Magic Eraser to clean tough messes off my stovetop and bathtub. But then I discovered I can also use it to easily clean my patio furniture and even my shoes. I'm hooked.
And when wipes won't cut it, I use Magic Eraser Sheets. They're thin and flexible erasers, perfect for everyday messes, like gunk on my counters and sinks. They really are magical.
The reviews are in. Mr. Clean Magic Eraser and Sheets make cleaning look easy.
Any Hour Services free furnace sale is going on right now. If you haven't scheduled your free estimate yet, what are you waiting for? Call Any Hour Services today or schedule online at anyhourservices.com.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
You know, every once in a while you go to an event and you just get stirred. Your mind gets moving, your heart gets pumping. You start seeing things just a little bit bigger and a little bit better. There was a great event last night down in Utah County at the American Heritage School. God's Hand in America had a wide range of speakers, including former Representative Chris Stewart. And he was so strong in his reflection on where we are as a country. And I thought it was just powerful the way he approached it all. And so I want to start with just a little bit from Chris Stewart as he talked about the principle, the indispensable principle of freedom.
The Spirit of God is the Spirit of freedom. It binds us in ways that I don't think we can quite appreciate. And I don't know that we consider them one and the same quite to the degree that they are one of the same. The Spirit of God is the Spirit of freedom, and people know it and they sense it. As I've traveled the world and talked to people, I see their expectation of us. They know. They pray for us. They want us to succeed. And they know that not only best hope, for most of them, their only hope of ever having any freedom is if we are there to help them in that.
As Representative Chris Stewart, of course, retired just last week. And that principle, again, that the people from all around the world are actually rooting for America to succeed because they know that's the best hope for freedom all around the world, not just here in the United States of America. Now, of course, as Representative Stewart retired, and of course his wife, Evie, has had some of her own health struggles, part of his decision to leave Congress. Congressman Stewart called on his wife at this event, and she was extraordinary, powerful. Evie Stewart talked about something I think we often miss in this country, and that is the sacrifice of families who are supporting those in our military. She talked about the 15 years that Chris Stewart served in the military and what that meant for their family.
We lived in so many states that the country seemed to grow smaller. And not Utah anymore, but the United States of America became my home. Emergencies came and went. And I was much on my own, and I soon realized that real life happens whether my husband is home or not. And I became so dependent upon God when only God's hand was there. And when only God had the power to help me. When we were stationed in Spokane, Washington, Chris missed over a year of our lives. And I said, oh, this is hard. Then one day, I held a dear friend in my arms as she sobbed because her husband had been killed the night before, and suddenly my sacrifices seemed very insignificant. For real sacrifice is really hard.
Evie went on to say that other countries don't have the freedoms that we do, but they hope that the great American experiment of freedom succeeds.
Well, now we've been all over this world, and we've met with kings, presidents, prime ministers, dictators, heads of state, and the people and the religious leaders. And we've been to countries where there is no such thing as freedom, no free speech, even where it's illegal to believe in a supreme being. I've met with refugees who escaped only with their lives because their homes had been burned down because they were Christian. And people often say to me, we want your free country to succeed. It is our only hope that one day we can live under freedom.
Evie concluded by talking about the power of sacrifice and that connection to freedom.
Freedom and sacrifice are spiritual. And God wants all men to live under freedom, but on this earth.